Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to briefly discuss the mediated communication chapter. We're going to talk about social media and some of the pros and cons with using social media in your interpersonal relationships. Let's begin. So let me put it right here. Okay. Let me move myself so we can. It's going to be a little bit. I'll be moving myself a little bit. All right. So when we talk about or think about mediated communication, we're thinking about communication related to social media. And one of the first questions that we want to ask ourselves in this chapter, are we able to connect with each other properly on social media, or do we break apart? Now, we've all seen on social media online beefs, online arguments, and people not necessarily acting super civilized online. However, we've also seen instances that social media has brought people together, activist movement on social media, and just a place for us to connect online. So I want you to think about this. Does social media bring us together, or does it break us apart, or a little bit of both? Okay. So from the book standpoint, there are some parts of social media and mediated communication that can break us apart. That's not a definitive answer from the first question I posed, but here are some things to think about as we venture into using social media and we want to become competent communication, excuse me, we want to become competent communicators both in face-to-face communication and online. So we don't want threats to our mental and physical health. When we think about chronic online use, and just being absorbed in the online world, we want to make sure that we are making time for our face to face interactions and balancing between our time online and outside of our online realms. Plus, we want to make sure that we're getting exercise and that we are maintaining our health as well. Being sedentary, and I'm also working on exercise as well. But being sedentary and being online all the time isn't healthy, isn't good for our health as well. So making sure that we're maintaining a healthy balance, not only for our mental health and physical health, and we don't want it to be a complete substitution for face-to-face interaction. Of course, for long distance interactions, say if you have a relative in another country or people are in long distance friendships or relationships, of course, the benefits of social media and mediated communication and video chatting is a way to connect us to people who to whom can't be in our person, who can't be with us in person rather. But we also want to make sure that we are strengthening both our online and face-to-face skills. And sometimes by being chronically online, we could face alienation. We might compare ourselves to others, and we might just, let me make sure to do that again. We might compare ourselves to others, or we might feel alienated from our face-to-face contacts because we might be online too much. Let's see. I'm going to be moving my face around a little bit just in case because I have different spaces where I can be. Hello. All right. But it can also help us connect with each other. Just in the previous example, say for instance, during the pandemic or during times where we are apart from our loved ones, we can use social media, media communication, and video communication to see and hear the people that we know and love. Or it can be a supplement to that face-to-face interaction. So think about a phone call versus seeing someone face to face. social media interactions can also enhance or supplement our face-to-face interactions. So it's not a either or situation, of course, unless you're separated. It can be a way to ease into new friendship or romantic partnership. So back in the day, you had to meet each other. Back in the day, you might be set up on a blind date if you didn't know the other person, or it might be a group date, or you might know each other as friends. And those things still can happen, but with the invention of dating apps and being able to connect with one another on social media apps, using social media can be a safer, low risk, low stakes way of getting to know the person versus seeing them face to face all the time. Then you can sustain connection in those romantic partnerships as well because you're able to see them, you're able to be able to talk to them, especially when you're referring to long distance romantic partnerships or establishing those romantic partnerships either through apps or just seeing someone you meet online and establishing that connection. All right, so let me move myself over here. The book also poses the question if mediated communication is superficial. So, when we talk about superficiality of communication mediums, what are we talking about? How many followers or friends do you have online? And how many of those friends that you have online do you know in real life? Personally, I have a lot of followers or people I'm following, but I only know a fraction of those people. So even though social media and mediated communication can be a great tool for building communication, with these platforms, you're able to connect with more people than you can possibly keep up as regards to maintaining a relationship for. And when we talk about the richness of communication, face to face is the richest because you're able to see them, you're able to hear them, you're able to interact with them. But online, although it's a little bit more richer than sending letters or just texting, excuse me, it's a medium point, or excuse me, it doesn't provide as much richness as a face-to-face interaction, but it can be a little bit more richer than just a phone call or text, if that makes sense. Can we gain meaning from mediated communication? We can find like-minded people, people who are into the same hobbies as we are. For example, I like to play The Sims, so I like to be in a lot of Sim communities or subscribe to Sims YouTube channels, and I'm able to see and hear what's happening on the Sims video game streets, if you will. We can strengthen existing relationships and with social media, we're able to gain a shared meaning, we're able to gain meaning within our networks, even though our relationships might not be as rich as far as close, we can get multiple perspectives and get multiple or gain multiple communication skills and competencies through these relationships. We can also build social capital. Think about influencers or people, think of people who have personal brands online. I'm going to teach a business communications course soon, and by the time you see this video, I've already taught it. But I mentioned creating our own personal brand and using social media to do it. So you can build friendships and connections. Just make sure to be smart with it and make sure to be careful about who you connect with. But you can build social capital and brands on social media. We see it all the time. And say if a person doesn't have that many close face-to-face interactions, they're able to find those connections online. But of course, be careful and make sure that if you are establishing a more deeper, meaningful connection with someone, just make sure that you're safe. Safety always first. I move myself again. Well, is mediated communication healthy? Well, it depends. Just like in the first couple of slides, we want to make sure to have a healthy connection and relationship with social media. We don't want to be sedentary all the time. We want to make sure that we're out and about, interacting with our world, and using social media and mediated communication as a tool of connection, not our only connection. We can use it to develop and maintain connections as long as we establish that balance. Gain social support. So think of Reddit forums. I'll give you an example. So I'm interested in pursuing student loan forgiveness on my student loan because I'm an instructor. So I found a Reddit forum that talks about people who are pursuing student loan forgiveness and what they did, congratulating people who were able to obtain it, or consoling people who weren't able to obtain it. So even though I don't know these people, I'm able to get information and social support from that particular forum. And that's just one of many examples. Then you can get feedback on a variety of topics. YouTube, Reddit forums, social media posts, Instagram posts, and comment sections. I love scrolling down and reading comment sections for entertainment and information. So, if you have a healthy boundary with what you will say and do on social media, then it can be your way to find information and make connections. But just make sure that because you don't know everyone, and of course, we want to make sure that we're not giving personal information and we want to make sure that we're safe online, just make sure to have those healthy boundaries. But the book also poses, let me see where I can put myself. I'm right here. Hi. The book also poses the question, when is social media unhealthy? Sleep deprivation. Haha. So I'm not going to front or pretend that I haven't been online for a little bit later than I needed to or wanted to. And then I'm like, oh, I have to go to bed. And I literally put down my phone. So you want to make sure that you're not online. Talking to myself here. Make sure that you're not online so chronically that you're not getting sleep. It's happened to the best of us. Just make sure to have those healthy boundaries. We can also, in a more serious note, we can also create unhealthy relationships or unhealthy parasocial relationships to the people online, which can lead to depression, loneliness, and social anxiety. You want to make sure to keep perspective of social media not necessarily being a true to life real message, but it's the persona that people craft for public consumption. Think about what TV used to be like or what magazines used to be like to the public. There are they're scripted or maybe reality TV, but they're curated messages and you have to think about social media in that same light. You want to make sure to not have diminished self-esteem as well. Be mindful that hey, people are putting their highlight reel on social media, but you know the ins and outs and ups and downs of who you are. So make sure that you're not comparing yourself to people on social media. I've done it, and as I get older, I catch myself doing that again. But in teaching this class and getting older and using social media, I've been able to create that healthy boundary, but not always. We're human, and just give yourself grace. You don't want social media to consume you so much that you have a lack of well-being as well. So the key with social media, in essence, is to have healthy boundaries, know the limits of social media, and use it to maximize what you want to do, just like any other form of communication competence. So let me switch myself up here. Mediated communication can be as rewarding as face-to-face communication, depending on the people who are communicating and the purpose. You can ask yourself or think about how does the amount of and the nature of your mediated communication affect your in-person relationships. Sometimes it's enhanced, sometimes it's used as a supplement, as we talked about earlier, or sometimes we're on there too much, or maybe we're not on there enough. We might not have the skills to properly navigate our way to social media. No matter what, we still need to at least learn about social media, especially as we go into our careers and our field, because social media has permeated a lot of our lives, just like the internet does. But you can create the rules of how you engage with social media as well. So I'm going to put myself over here. Excuse me. Zoom. This is just a diagram that talks about the different ranges of communication and communication richness. We have on this axis public versus private communication, impersonal, which means a separation or objective type of communication. So it's not personalized, it's for the masses, and personal, specific communication that is catered to you or by you. So when we think of mass communication, we think about newspapers, YouTubes, podcasts, and vlogs. Newspaper and TV are more on the public impersonal axis, so it's for a mass audience, it's not personalized. As you go into this side, we have tailored emails or tailored spam or group emails. So they're impersonal, but they're more private or catered to you. YouTube videos and podcasts and vlogs are going a little bit more to the personal side. Then we have mass personal communication and interpersonal communication. So this class is interpersonal communication. That's when we establish relationships between people, and with this type of communication or these media and these type of media, excuse me, we have email, phone, private messages, and face-to-face conversation, which means these are personalized for for that interaction, interpersonal communication. But then there is the rise of mass personal communication. So this is personalized to your experience, but it's for public consumption. So tweets, now it's called something else now, but blogs, Instagram posts, a jumbotron proposal. I haven't seen that in years, but will you marry me on the jumbotron? It's for everybody to see, but it's personalized for that couple. Online dating sites, so it's somewhere in the middle where someone posts their information on a dating site for a larger audience, and then it's narrowed down as they find someone to date. And radio call-ins, that is a throwback to my generation, where you want to request something and you do a radio call-in, or you want to, excuse me, or you want to win a prize. And I just noticed what I did here. A little bit connected to this chapter. When I signify the phone, I did this, right? But nowadays, people do this to have the example of a regular flat phone. But because I am an older Gen Y, I'm used to a headset. So I just noticed that I did that here. But anywho, here are the types of ways that we communicate and the many ways it can be catered towards a mass audience or private communication. So let me move myself over here. So finally, we're going to talk about competence in mediated communication. So for the first couple of chapters, we talked about communication competence, making sure that our communication is effective and appropriate, and in intercultural communication competence. So now we're talking about communication competence in the mediated communication space. So we are thinking about the richness versus the leanness of communication. I'll show you a diagram in a minute talking about how much of the senses and how much information can be distributed through a medium versus mediums that might not have as much information that can be distributed, determining which message route to take, whether it be video, letters, or text, thinking about which is the best way to spread your message, and how personal do you want to get. So, for example, as an instructor, I decided that I censor my personal life on social media. And I'm a pretty boring person, so you're not going to find anything. I'm a pretty boring person, but because of my profession, I want to make sure that I am looked at in the best light. And I was previously in public relations, so that tendency to not share as much of myself online transferred to this part of my career. But some people might be hyper personal online, and their brand is based on them being personal and have that authentic connection with their audience. So it's definitely based on what you're comfortable with, but just know the risk of being super personal. And of course, like I said before, safety first. Don't give out personal information. And just be careful out there. But you get to choose how much of your information goes out there to the masses or mass personal communication, just like in the previous slide. But also know the more personal that you get online, there could be consequences. So please be careful. So with the leanness and richness spectrum, we have text message, which is more leaner. It's pretty much words and letters, so you don't necessarily get tone. We don't necessarily get inflections or any other context in the message, which in the perception chapter we'll think about how does that affect communication. Then we have voice, which is a little bit richer because you can get the tone of the voice. So for example, it's the difference between how you doing versus how you doing. You know exactly that even though I said the exact same thing, those how you doings mean two different things. Then we have audio visual. So we're a little bit audio visual right now. So it's asynchronous because you're going to be seeing this at a later time, but you get to see my face, get the hand gestures. You see me move the screen a bunch of times, and you're able to see me versus when I send you information via announcements or emails. Then in person. So more than likely, if we're in this medium, you won't see me in person. But a happy medium between this is not in person, but video conferencing or Zooms or any other video conferencing software can be a live synchronous interaction. So I can answer your questions and we can communicate in real time versus asynchronously like we're doing now. But if you see me in person on campus, you can say hi and we can talk in person and get tone, inflection, and all those things. So the richness, leanness spectrum, mediated communication falls in these spectrums depending on what you're using. Okay, let's move myself right here. See the movements of the camera in this lecture. So, communication competence. Consider the communicators and the environment. Remember the communicators and environment from chapter 1, where we talked about the transactional communication model. You want to consider the receiver's preference. Use multimodality. So some people are comfortable on video, some people are not. So just make sure to keep the other person in mind. Respect the other's needs for undivided attention. So make sure you're not on social media when you're in a face-to-face context. Make sure you're not on your phone when you're supposed to be paying attention to the other person. Use your nonverbal communication if you are in a video context. Like for example, I'm looking at the video camera right now. So I am indicating to you, even though it's asynchronous communication, that I'm looking at you in a way. But if I was looking down the whole time, although it's asynchronous, you might not be as connected because you're like, oh, okay, why isn't she looking at the camera and looking at me? Does that make sense? Be careful of bystanders. Excuse me, I think I keep